You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey, Jeeples. Kevin here. Welcome to show 175.
Ooh, year I was born.
What?
75, not 175. Wow. that was BS before Scott.
Very much so. Hey, guys. Welcome to, as we said, show 175. This was going to be a kind of offbeaty, maybe not that offbeaty. It was when we were discussing it earlier. We got into a talk that had nothing to do with the show and everything to do with Scott's propensity for running off and spending money and putting and more stuff yet into storage.
So I will do that before we do that. That too.
Yeah, we're gonna lead into our normal intro. Yes. Hi, folks. I'm Kevin, the engineer, the guy who reads instructions. Maybe not this show following them, and generally uses the right tools or something I can fake into that situation.
And I'm Scott. I'm the slapstick parts guy that'll get that thing on that car. Doesn't matter if I have to use duct tape, zip tie, and or a stapler. I don't care what's going on, and even if I have to get a 15-pound nail gun. So with that, while we will always share what worked for us as well as what didn't, remember it's always up to you to do your research, read the instructions, and please follow them.
Anyhow, now that we've got that out of the way, we come in and Scott pops me off with a question this morning as we're setting up to do this recording, and he's like, what do you think? I always love questions that start with, what do you think? I try to as little as possible, but what do you think about these Amazon branded components? I'll leave it at components for the moment. The story will blossom further. And I'm looking at him going, really? Really? Okie dokie. And it was an Amazon version of a product from a manufacturer that I kind of go, okay.
Wow, you're painting me in such a light right now.
Yeah, well, that's the way it felt. We're about as far away from the choice that I made on this component as you can get.
I thought we were going to talk about drive shafts. Wah, wah.
Well, that's later.
Yeah, it's later. Okay.
No, we're talking about those funny little implements that people start to say, well, it'll protect me from water. Oh, no. It's got ram air that'll help get me more horsepower.
Ooh, it's like a cold air.
Yes, or other fun things. And that would be
a snorkel.
Yes. And Scott has become desirous of a snorkel upon his Gladiator.
All right, we need to reset the expectation here for the show. Hi, everybody, it's me now trying to defend myself. So, as with usual, when I decided that the Gladiator was mine, it took some time. I wanted three things on that Gladiator. I wanted the amber grill lights, like the pre-runner lights. Mm-hmm. That was my vision. I wanted bronze, not gold, bronze wheels on the Gladiator. And last, I wanted a snorkel, besides the lift, of course. And
so that's four technically, but four. Okay.
But
he's talking about
my vision.
Design elements as opposed to simply functionals.
And to be honest with you, and so on Monday, Cyber Monday, I saw a post on one of the
forums,
the Gladiator forums, and I've had my eyes on the rugged ridge. I'm just being honest because I like the way it looked. I like the fact you can have the cowl style, or you can go up to the snorkel wherever you want. Mm-hmm. But still not having in the world of employment. I was like, I'm not ready to pull the trigger on that yet. Well, go back to that post, and next thing you know, it talks about, a person posted, hey, what do y'all think about this Amazon, which I didn't know existed? And I look at it, and of course, I've seen the post about Amazon bumpers and rusting and stuff like that. And, when it comes to Amazon, I'm like, and as we talk about with lifts, save your money and get what you really want, by all means. But I really started thinking, again, seeing Kevin with his snorkel he has, I'm like, you know what? Is it really that bad? So I decided I'd be the test mule and let it sit in the garage for a year, but kind of like the lift. But we'll get back to that in a minute. And one of the questions that they asked was, again, everyone was asking the same questions was, well, what's your purpose? Do you want us to be? Do you go in a deep off-roading situation with water? Do you like the idea of it? Maybe have a cold air aspect to it. Do you think it's going to add horsepower with the Ram Air and do all this? So I'm looking at this, and so I finally at the bottom said, you know what? Let me look at this thing. Oh wow! It's at the time of recording, it was over half as much as the Rugged Ridge style. And this is its exact knockoff. And then I'm saying, well, I started thinking about some more. And then everyone's like, well, it's going to fade and do this and do that. And I thought, well, a cowl vent faded on these big Gladiators. If you have a JK or a Gladiator or a JL, anything
what the black plastic, even on the TJs, the fender flares of this Mopar black plastic,
they turn gray within a year.
Yeah,
it's just going to match everything else.
It's kind of like sun.
No,
Exactly.
I'm shrinking.
Well, you had a fancy word for plasticizers and all that. But anyways, painting with a broad brush.
They turn gray.
I looked at it and said, you know what? It just looks cool. That's the reason why I want. That's my justification. It just looks cool.
Okay.
I don't expect to take the Gladiator up to my armpits in water. That's what the LJ's for. And number two, again, I know I'm not going to add copious amounts of horsepower because I still have the old factory restricted exhaust. It just looks cool. And you know what, guys? That's okay.
Yeah.
That is okay if it looks cool. So
if you like it, that's a good reason.
I ordered one and it's going to be here soon, especially with the savings. They had,
We'll see how gray it turns in the box in the garage.
Ouch. Ow.
Well, folks, in case you didn't pick up on that, we did finally get the LJ's lift put on, right?
Yeah.
And he promptly went out and bought the Gladiator one and shoved it in the same corner that
literally less than 48 hours later.
Yeah. And so it's been in the garage in the same spot that the JL. Now it makes the Gladiator feel right at home because it's now sharing the garage in spirit, as its lift has to age properly in Scott's eyes.
Exactly. Now I'm hoping to get it installed. Again, we always say this. I was hoping to get it installed before I went to Tennessee and Jasper, but hope springs eternal. But I think Mattson may come down here and say, no, we're doing this right now. I brought a zip tie. No, but
either him or Will or Corey,
any of them,
Jesse,
exactly. Robbie, the one that called me and says, "Hey, your stuff's here." But no, it's interesting because again, we always preach. Save a little money and get what you really want and do that. So this
in the long run, folks, it may cost more.
Yeah.
But I just have to laugh because you take that as a counterpoint. Where I'm running the River Raider cast aluminum beastie in my TJ, and it was anything but Amazon cheap.
Yeah, no.
It's one of those things that's made by Kenny there at River Raider /
Hawk Design.
Kenny Hawk, and it is a penultimate piece. I paid dearly for it. I waited and saved for a year, but there was a different reason on mine. As much as I did want it, I knew I had a intake restriction in the factory system,
right?
And I did want the cold air intake. And the TJs, unfortunately, design-wise, if you look under the hood of any TJ that's done anything off-road, you will notice a stripe that arcs under the hood of whatever the fan could pick up and throw across the hood.
Yeah.
And the end of that stripe is right where the intake air horn is pointed.
Yeah.
So it's a waterlogging system.
Yeah.
If you get much more than 8 inches of water. And
feeling thirsty, let me go through a puddle.
Yeah. And I do take the TJ quite frequently through water. Done a few video snips of that, particularly during hurricanes, and I take it out as far as I used to be part of the federal response system. And yes, I could drive my POV at my own risk. And there are places I went during hurricane seasons where the depth was kind of important.
Yeah.
And I remember one here, Dover Road. I was, you could see the yellow line as you entered the water, and finally it disappeared. And you were navigating by the edges of the trees, hoping you didn't go off to the right into the ditch or the left of the ditch. And then finally a ghost of a yellow line would show up again, and you'd come up on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I did want water control. And we'll get more into the tech on that stuff when we start talking about these snorkels. But Scott got his reasons, and there's nothing wrong with the reason of I like the way it looks.
Yeah. And again, I know going into this is kind of like a test meal. Like we looked at the install video.
He doesn't have to cut anything. He doesn't have to grind anything, doesn't replace anything. He takes his old corner what do you call that piece? You know,
the air box, and then you basically go in and you snap off the little intake they have.
Yeah, I'm talking about on the outside though.
Oh, the cowl,
the corner of the
cowl.
cowling. Yeah, those black plastic corner cowls. You take that off, and you can put that away and let that marinate in the garage, and then it won't match the rest of the Jeep if you ever put it back on.
Nice,
but and then you have a whole replacement kit. With a cute little rubber adjustable foot so that it leans back against your windshield but doesn't scratch it.
Exactly. Well, and now on top of that, though, I do have questions like, you know, when you see the install video and you see how they snap that, the I'm going to call it an intake air horn.
Yeah.
And then you snap on this one little piece. So it's like all this water intrusion is in a foam gasket in a little couple small clips.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's why I don't put a whole lot of faith in this snorkel.
Well, and the thing is, when you look at it, though, you can't see, they didn't give you a 360 view. There may be a drain hole. And if there isn't, we can add one.
Well, it comes with a little drain petcock kind of thing.
Okay, but that's a petcock for opening and closing. Most drains, you know, the worst that we might have to do is get you a duckbill valve like I put in mine,
right,
and put it in the bottom of your air box so that when you take your foot off a throttle and the air pressure is flowing in there, the water can drain out freely, anything that does get in there.
Yeah.
And that's why if you look at a factory air box, there's almost always a hole in the bottom. People, shouldn't I seal that up? No, you really shouldn't.
Yeah.
Even Chrysler knows some water is going to get in there some way, and you have to give it a way out that's easier than the engine.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Because that's how you get a bunch of shiny metally bits everywhere.
Yes, and there's individuals in this studio who have witnessed that.
Well, and that's the other thing. That's one of the things. Like, a call back for the JK we had was, you know, snorkel was a must. It might be a little bit of a head nod, but again, more it's to the fact that I just think it looks cool. Mm-hmm. But again, I want to see how this is. I want to see the build quality. I want to see everything. I want to have it in my hands, and I'm going to give a report on it. Because
and the other thing that's nice about something that you buy from Amazon as a good Amazon customer, if you receive it and it doesn't look like it's usable, if it's not up to your preference, if you don't destroy the packaging, you can return it.
Yeah.
And get pretty much all your money back.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about all this. So, one of the many reasons I'm doing this is because, again, we don't want to sit there like we condemn, you know, other lift kits. You know, we always said, you know, wheels what the budget allows. Well, my budget allowed this.
Yeah.
So this is just me being honest. I'm going to see how it is.
Yeah, and he's going to be the test mule, and then we're going to go out and see how it works. And I
with the exception of the water crossing. With the exception of the water crossing, okay?
So that's going to round off into a little subcategory.
Yeah.
And we talked about this quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Folks, I've said it before, I'll say it again. A snorkel does not make a Jeep into a submarine.
Yeah.
A snorkel simply raises your air intake point. There's a whole lot of other stuff that has to be taken care of along that way. You know, you have transmission vents. Some of the models of the Jeeps, the 3-speed automatics and the earlier ones, you didn't have access to the vent without major surgery on an automatic transmission. It vented, believe it or not, into the bell housing where the torque converter sat. Now, torque converters are really good at taking in water and spinning it all around. Now, they themselves are water sealed, but they pump a whole lot of water right up near the vent. And when you hit that cold water and the fluids contract inside the transmission, it kind of goes, oh, you were thirsty? Here's more.
Yeah.
And then you end up with strawberry milkshake for transmission fluid, which a good friend of mine found out doesn't shift very well.
No.
And so please do not misconstrue that a snorkel makes your Jeep water ready. Yeah. It is a step, a part, a piece. You need to kind of think like a water drop. You know, where can I get in? And you need to make sure that it can't get in, and that places that need air need to get dry air.
Yes.
So axle vents, differential vents, transmission, transfer case, even your engine's venting system. It's better because it's part of, you know, but if you've taken it off, if you got one of those little filter thingies sitting up on your valve cover instead of a closed sealed system, all that needs to be addressed. How about, here's one. If you've got a PDA, it has a vent hole in the bottom, folks. And you can't just plug these things because then they will break down and quit. So you have to fasten a fitting onto them that you can hook a vent line and then take that vent line to somewhere where it can be safely getting dry air.
Right.
All of these are challenges, and anybody that has seen sippy hole racing,
Okay.
they have gone to an extreme. That's, folks, where if you've ever seen them, Jeeps, buggies, and custom-built rigs that run these courses, they're race courses, but they're full of water. So you're actually running semi-submerged, and then there's always a sippy hole, and you hit the sippy hole, and you go way down, and your intake system better be capable, and your venting system. Otherwise, you waterlog, and immediately they're towing you out with a boat.
Well, that's like tube sock.
Tube sock.
The scuba diving with it. If you look at that little snorkel, like they had it on,
it had all
these vent lines and everything going up.
And so, and that was an extreme level of waterproofing. Now, and even there, as soon as it came out, they drained everything and refilled it, because the best you can do, you're still going to work some water in past the seals. So this is just something to keep in head. I don't want people to think that we're saying, oh, you can put a snorkel on and go out and dive your Jeep. Even mine it increased and helped, but I'm still not going to take it much more than tire deep. At that point, my vents are now becoming, a concern. But that's about as far as I've extended the hoses. Like up in the rear ones go up in by the gas fill cap.
Yeah.
So if I get past the arch of the wheel well, I'm standing a pretty good chance of getting water where I don't want water to go.
Well, not only that, but behind the dashboard. I mean,
you don't want it inside. I run full doors when I'm going to swim.
Well, even
if I
then,
can.
the water's starting to get past those full doors.
Yeah,
the seals. So again, especially if you have a JL, JK, or
you can really spend some money getting water inside.
Yeah, because guys, they total vehicles when they flood.
Yeah,
for that reason. And so those are the kind of things where I've seen radios not work because they left the top off.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you have all the sensitive electronics, and I know. This will be I can hear the other crowd going, and that's why I drive a CJ, because there's none of this electrical junk in it, so I can.
But you still have a distributor and a coil.
You got a gas tank.
Yeah, if you get water in a gas tank, it doesn't go very far either.
No,
and it has a vent.
It has a vent.
So this is one of those things that if you're going to go and play the deep water, you need to think every place that you don't want water. Mm-hmm. And that's Tube Sock is a classic example of their strategy. And what they don't show you on the videos is how many times they tested it and went, oh, I got water. I'm sorry. Is that still considered one of the seven deadly words?
Yes, that's one of the 7 deadly words.
I'm sorry,
podcasting.
Oh, Shucky darns.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like an old TV host,
Yeah, well.
And now the mistakes I made with your host, Oh Shucky Darns. Hiya, kids. I'm Oh Shucky Darns. Pleased to meet you over here.
Anyhow.
I knew I should have took the battery terminals off before I started messing with electronics.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me just use my pal Zap.
Exactly, if you are going to play in water, just a thought for those electronic things is, look into marine stuff.
Yeah.
That's usually made to have seals and be relatively water resistant.
Resistant, yeah.
Not proof, but resistant.
It's amazing how we get that confused a lot,
Yeah, we do.
It's waterproof. No, it's water resistant. Isn't that the same thing?
No.
You have IP68 and IP67. IP67 means you're holding your breath while using it.
Yes.
IP68, which is most of everything, you can hit it with a hose.
Yeah, and take a shower and forget to take it off, or wash your hands without danger of a watch going bad. For the most part, but not everything and always. It's just, anyhow. The other thing we're going to look at is some of the differences as his unit comes in. I do like the part that it bolts in with no permanent changes that we can see. We'll let you know. Whereas most of the earlier snorkels, you either cut sheet metal in the fender or you cut sheet metal in the hood. Right. I did the hood cuts, but that was a choice of, where I felt comfortable. Plus, if I cut where you normally cut a TJ for a snorkel entrance, which is down by the passenger's ankle level into the fender, you would run into where my battery now hides because I have a battery relocation kit. Yes, sir.
Well, that's actually one of the interesting things where it's like, let me put the snorkel. I always thought was funny with that TJ kit is let me put the snorkel up higher so I can't get water in it. And even though the factory hood one's about, let's say, armpit height on a lifted Jeep,
Yeah.
let me lower that down to, belt buckle height.
Or lower.
So I can get, again, if you have that, great, good for you. That's the point that
The other thing I
concerns
want to
me.
talk about on your snorkel kit that we're going to look at, just as prep for everybody else, is snorkels actually don't keep water out. In fact, they bring more in. They
Right.
keep flood waters out. You're not going to draw in, solid raw water bore like when you do like a TJ when it flaps, it literally pumps water up into the intake. And yes, I had that happen before I got the snorkel. Fortunately, the filter was a better one than I thought, and it didn't let too much water into the engine. Anything to cause damage, it just stalled and said, no air. You can't breathe water.
Yeah, no moss.
No, and but you do have to have, with a snorkel, since they usually face forward, although Scott's has the option of facing backwards, you are going to get rainwater in.
Yeah.
How do you handle it? Where does it go? How does it get out? You really don't want it to exit through the engine. Yes, I've read the things and understand that, some moisture's good. That's moisture, as in vapor. It is not incompressible liquid.
Yeah.
Since this engine has this thing about what you call it, inhale, squish. You're going to use the actual words?
I think we can.
Okay.
Let's see. It's a suck, squeeze, bang, and blow. And now we're off iTunes.
No. And that has to do with the intake, compression, ignition, and exhaust strokes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, on that compression one, water's incompressible, folks. You don't want it inside your engine.
Ask me how I know.
Yes, Scott's engine made room for water.
Yeah.
It's amazing if you bend the connecting rod with a little S curve in it, you now have more room for water.
Exactly.
On the other hand, you don't have quite the same compression, which means you don't have quite the same power. And the computer goes 1, 2, three's a little weak. 4, 4, 3 just isn't quite talking right. And that little thing that most mechanics don't call the check engine light. You know what they call it, don't you?
The malfunction indicator light?
No, not the mill. They have a better term for it. Hey, the money light's on.
Money lights on. We are really skirting the dangers in this podcast.
Well,
today.
No, but that's you go to any good mechanic shop and they're going to go, we got that Gladiator out there, he was out wheeling it and he's coming in. He says, money lights on.
Yeah.
And they know what they mean. Okay.
Yep.
And anyhow, we're going to take a look at this snorkel kit from the Big A, and how does it handle water? Does it just assume it? Does it, your original air box has a hole in the bottom, and everybody thinks, should I seal that up? And the answer is, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
That's where the water goes that does get into the system when you're playing in heavy rains, and folks, we get, and I'm not exaggerating,
4 inches.
4 inch per hour rainfalls here in Florida, a regular summer event. And you will see automachines stalled on the side of the road because their intake system just couldn't take it. Particularly, there was something in the 70s and 80s where manufacturers trying to get cold air intakes for the emission reasons were bringing the intakes down low behind the bumper.
Yeah, no, actually, it's in the early 90s and late 90s, actually. A lot of
that too?
imports, that it was underneath, like right in front of the front tire.
Yeah, in which case, they were really good if you kind of dunked the car into a low spot. And we have low spots all over Florida. Most of Florida's low.
Yeah.
You dunk it in and it goes slurp.
Well, that's one of the things I'm thinking of because I do so much interstate driving.
Yeah.
It's like here I am going to be on the interstate and I get a good, hard Florida rain. And I got that snorkel facing forward,
Well, you may try it backwards, but as I said, that folks, when you face a snorkel backwards, yes, you don't pull in sand and rain, but you also lose any of the ram air effect, however small it may be. So just keep that in mind that you actually now are intaking against a slight vacuum because the air is rushing away. And that's fine. The engine will pull it in that way. I know that if you go look at pictures of rigs that are running out in the Middle East, the snorkels all face back. They do put snorkels on, and it's to keep sand out of the intake because it's very abrasive. And by facing it back, that's what they want it to do, is they want it to pull the dust away.
Okay.
from the engine. Most other places that it's wetter will face it forwards, but the system, somewhere between that snorkel intake and your air cleaner, there is a spot that either catches and diverts or drains out some way the water. And we've said this before, so I'm sorry for those that have paid attention over the years. But I have what's called a duckbill valve in my intake system on my air filter canister.
Right.
And my air filter canister is actually tipped downhill towards the incoming air, whereas the cone filter sits in that housing with its point facing the incoming air, which means that water can come in. If it hits the filters, that's usually fine because it'll be immediately evaporated by the incoming air, which I said, vapor water is not a hard thing on engines as long as it's a reasonable amount. But any of the heavier moisture will fall down into that stainless steel canister, and gravity will help it move to the bottom where that duckbill is. And at any time I let off throttle in any size, shape, or form where the incoming air rush now overpowers because the throttle blades are closed,
right,
I create a positive pressure in that canister, and it spits out water. And it does it really well. And under low throttle, it just drains because the water's heavy enough to open the valve itself. But when I hit my foot to the floor, it sucks the lips of this little rubber valve closed. It's used by the military in the Humvees and all the military vehicles that are used to cross water. That's exactly what it's there for. It's an escape path for water that won't let it back in. It's a one-way door. And so we're going to take a look at this kit and see what its plans are. They may just leave, since they use the factory airbox bottom. I don't know on the Gladiator if it has the drain holes. So if that's the case, they're just using the factory drains.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
We'll check it out.
Yeah, because I think we had it off just recently when we were doing the winch mounting, and I forgot to look then.
I didn't look. I just let you take it off so that we could. I remember a few choice words trying to balance 37 pieces of steel and brackets that didn't tell you whether they went right or left or up or down.
Yeah.
Several installs and removals and repeats and going, how does this thing fit?
Yeah. I think we're only allowed 2 bleeps per episode. Let's be careful.
That's why I stopped and didn't go any deeper.
No, but I do want to give a quick little update, though, on the LJ and those Mastercraft seats. I really haven't driven the Gladiator much. I love how that rides. And I titled the last show The Best Seat in the House. And I'll tell you what, it is true. If you are ever on the fence about these things, man, any type of suspension racing seat, do it. Absolutely do it, because the LJ is so nice to drive now. I used to love driving the Gladiator because the ride was so nice. No, even though the Gladiator does ride a little nicer, getting longer wheelbase, that suspension seat and the metal cloak suspension. Oh,
you don't remember all the way back when I put my seats in. That was the subject when I did the show, was that, guys, I just learned that, and this was back then, that a lot of your perception of how a vehicle rides is a function of how the seats protect your bottom. Yeah. And, I hadn't, I already done the lift. I'd already done the tire changes. And I was like, well, it rode okay, but it still was a Jeep.
Yeah.
I changed those seats, and it was like, I should have done the seats first. I'd almost start to think that the first thing you ought to do is put seats in, particularly in the small bodies.
Yeah.
Or the medium bodies, correctly, because the small bodies are the Willys size. So the medium bodies, which are the YJ, TJ, CJ7 and that, up to the big bodies, which started with the JKs. And now we're getting into the ginormous bodies with the Gladiators.
No, the ginormous body is the Grand Wagoneer.
Well, that's true.
That is a Queen Mary right there.
Yeah, it takes 3 TJs and 1 Willys to get it in a parking spot.
Exactly. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And again, a couple listeners messaged me, hey, what do you think? And it's like, I 100% love it. Install is a challenge. You got to have small hands. Doable. Don't get me wrong. Doable. But you're going bolts into blind locations, trying to get your fingers up there. And because they're nylocks, once you finally do get the bolt wobbled so it's straight enough to get the nut started so it goes down 2 turns, now you've got to get up in there with a wrench. And they're like, oh, just use a ratcheting wrench. I did. Yeah, I did. And you could get, click, 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 yeah, click, click. And I was sitting and Scott goes, are you okay? I said,
I'll be here for an hour. You know.
Yeah.
Now, once they're down, it's done. It's in. It's fine. It's just warning. You know, and a lot of seats are that way. There's not a lot of room. Seats are for sitting on, not for taking in and out.
It's a one and done scenario.
Yeah. And other than if I redesign that release mechanism, and then mine's coming back out and going back in, which is actually going to make it tighter.
Yes.
But it'll put the seat back into a more normal height rather than 3/4 of an inch higher than a stock seat.
That's the first thing I had to do is I take off my panel mirror.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause I'm staring right in my eyes. I'm like, wow, this is both romantic and disturbing. So I
TMI there, bud.
I put a regular mirror back on, which is kind of nice. Of course, you know, me being cheap, go figure, right?
Yeah.
I bought the $13 Amazon mirror, and yeah, it shakes like you wouldn't believe. So the rear view mirror is useless as I'm going down the highway. Good, okay, when I'm stopped, but and it's not the bass either from the music.
Yes.
But it works. I mean, again, it's a mirror.
Well,
You know, I can change the lane without hearing crunching metal. So, but you want to tippy tire on into the garage for a second? Talk about the other.
sure. But do you want to do your segue in the middle?
Which one? Oh yeah. Wait. What segue?
Yeah, these people we team up with, some sort of network thing.
Oh yeah. Sorry. You know,
I don't want to steal your thunder. Sorry, guys.
I
He'll
deserve
wake
that
up
one.
original.
Yes. We'll be right back after this not at all station announcement. Hey Jeebers, it's Scott here, fresh off my flub when forgetting who I was and what I was doing. As always, remember to check out the 4x4 Radio Network and our Patreon
Yes,
page.
those people.
Yes, yay! We got the button here. Yay! And of course, you want help support the show. Check out the Patreon page and our YouTube page. So with that, we're going to go ahead and talk about Scott's lift that's still marinating since July, and to be turned in the garage. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Scott.
How are you?
I'm fine.
That's good.
Are you feeling better now?
No, not at all. Even though I'm on copious amounts of caffeine to try and stay awake, it ain't enough.
Right. Well, I do want to give a shout out to the other Facebook, YouTube entity that we've been trying to help out. The one you share an abode with.
Oh, yes.
Boy,
Wow.
you're 2 for 2.
Holy cow.
You're in trouble.
Someone's going to get spanked later.
No, there's so many wrong things to say. I don't want to get bleeped again.
Okay, moving on. So, as you were, Kevin.
What is her Facebook page?
She doesn't. It's just Autumn Sturgis.
Okay. So if you pull up blah, 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 now it's affecting me, Autumn Sturgis, you will see we have been helping her. Scott has a personal interest in it, but she has a project. And for all you lady jeepers out there, if you're feeling like, oh, well, I'd love to do this, but my significant other won't do it. Well, Autumn doesn't really have that problem, but she doesn't even want that help. She wants to do it herself. And her project, as we've mentioned before, is not your average everyday JK, JL, Gladiator. It's not even a YJ or a CJ5. It is a unicorn of unicorns. It is a 1942 Ford GPW.
Yep.
It's like a Willys, but it's not a Willys. It's cut from the same mold and same plans, but it's built by Henry J. himself. And during World War II, as we've talked about before.
Yep.
And this one they have discovered has a, what is it? A certified or a
Well, it's
a noted,
considered a historical antique because it saw combat.
and it saw combat in 42 or 43 or 44 or 45. We don't know yet. We got it running some time ago, and Autumn has decided to put up the some short videos that show the efforts. Pretty much Scott is off camera because he is the cameraman, and you'll see yours truly talking, trying to teach Autumn, and then getting out of her way to let Autumn do the work. So this is very much her project, very much her vehicle. And right now she is just getting started, but well on her way. And then did you post the videos of it operating?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
part 3 is coming out here soon once I get done editing it.
All right. Well, and we did actually get it running, and it made quite a few trips around the neighborhood and ventured out even once or twice into, I won't call it main roads, but I'll call it local community byways.
Yeah.
We're talking about a vehicle that predates turn signals. It does have brake lights, but they happen to be the lighting system is the combat lighting system. So as far as lumens and visibility, it's pretty negligible. And it was great fun teaching her the idea of this isn't just a clutch, folks. And we'll find out how old all of you guys are. This has a crash box.
Yeah.
Instead of for a transmission, which means it's not synchronized. The transmission in this vehicle, the engine's small enough, but the transmission is quite literally, I think a bag of bagels is probably bigger than the transmission in this thing.
The board we're recording on right now is bigger than that transmission.
It is. And so you trying to explain to somebody the concept of double clutching and RPM matching, it was fun. And she got there. She really did. So check out Autumn's Facebook posts. And I think she'd love to hear from you guys if you have comments. And girls, please, I'm including you in guys as in jeeping people, because here is a young lady who is decided she's going to make it happen her way.
Yep, absolutely. And the fun thing is, like, hey, I got a 3-piece transmission. Oh, you mean 3-speed? No, 3-piece. It's a case and 2 gears. I'm joking.
Pretty much it. And we went through that thing with her, and they did a fluids change top to bottom, and it has we have a replacement carburetor that goes on it now, but Scott was telling me that she went out there just this last week, I guess it was, and from when this was recorded, of course, and actually got it started without me playing choke and throttle, and made it run and got it up to temperature and checked the charging system, and lo and behold, it seems to be operating now. And so it's not 100% pure. Previous owners have done some work on it, some good, some not so good. And when I say not so good, please take that if you are the previous owner. I'm not trying to say negative, but the focus now is to restore this to at least the level it came home from the war. It's not going to be a pristine. It's not going to be a Concours as it rolled off of Henry's floor. But
it's going to be like it's rolled off the boat.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And it has some modern pieces in it that eventually will probably be removed and replaced with more appropriate time period appropriate. One of the neat things about a as returned vehicle as a concept is none of these vehicles ever came home with all the same parts they left. Okay. Their Jeep brethren, if we're going to use the global term Jeep, from whether it's Willys, whether it's Ford, whether it's, anybody else, heck, a lot of the parts they came home with weren't even for a Jeep. They might have been from a deuce and a half. A few of them came home with bits and pieces from aircraft. Whatever you could scrounge in the war was fair game. And so what we're going to do is try to work with Autumn and help her decide what would be prudent, to put in for various parts that right now it's got an alternator. Okay. And there was no alternator at that point. It would have been a generator of some size, shape, form. Does it have to be that Jeep's alternator? Well, a Concours, yes. As a come home from war, no. It could be any generator that would have been available out there in the battlefield.
Kubel wagon.
Don't laugh.
You joke. Yeah, I know.
But there were those kinds of, well, I don't have any U.S. in a bone pile, but there's a lot of burnt up, Axis vehicles out here. So let's see what we can make work. They are very, very simple. One of the most fun things I've talked about with her, Scott, and others was just teaching her how to start it, because this is a 1942 vehicle. There's no automatic choke. There's no high-speed idle. There's no fuel injectors, I guarantee you, to take care of anything. And we actually discussed it this morning, and Scott the light went off in his head that this is like starting an old lawnmower. You have fuel on. Let's see if there's fuel on. Okay. And that is the same as going down and looking at the fuel filter and going, it's a glass bowl, by the way, folks. Is there fuel in it? If not, you need to kind of figure out how to pump some in there. 2, all right, the throttle's closed. Now, you can play with your gas pedal, but you're not going to be able to hold it. Like on an old lawnmower, you open the throttle a little bit. So guess what it has on this Jeep? it has a little throttle lever that you pull out, and that opens the throttle. On the other side, there's another button that looks the same, but it says choke. You pull it out, and it closes the choke, just like the little choke lever for the lawnmower. So you close the choke, you open the throttle a little bit. How much? That's experience. And then you crank it, because this thing turns over with a 6-volt battery. And it should go, and it'll almost never keep running because the choke's closed all the way. Right. But if you don't close it all the way, you can't pull enough gas in to get it to start at all. So you immediately go push the choke in a quarter to halfway. Again, this vehicle, you're going to have to learn what it is. And then you crank, and usually it'll catch. And it might run a little fast because you got that throttle pulled out a little further than you should. But you now dance the gas, the throttle lever button and the choke button until it's warmed up.
Yeah.
There's nothing helping you. You have to do it all. And these older vehicles, particularly the flatheads, really didn't like to run cold because the fuel didn't atomize well, and you're usually sitting at the bottom of the intake pipe runner.
Yeah.
And but surprise, surprise, they report to me that they went out and played with it this last week and brought her to life.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed and very, hats off to her.
Yeah, no, she wanted to do it. But another thing we need to bring to life, and this one thing we talked about, is another question that I talked with Kevin about. And this we're gonna end. I guess it's interesting because it's a way to ask a question that I guess it's a way you can answer the question yourself before you ask it, if you will. And I asked Kevin, because I said, like I'm getting a little bit of driveline vibration in the LJ.
This is now, LJ. We've left the
42.
Left the 42.
Now we're in the 90s.
Yes, well, they didn't know that.
Yeah, sorry. Turn signals on, arms up.
By the way, it's the 05s.
Yeah, that too. As soon as I said 90s, I realized, whoops. But a little driveline vibration. So again, I started thinking with Kevin, and of course, I got to dial back the caster, and I'm going to pull the drive shaft to make sure that's my problem. That's the process of elimination. But I'm looking at the lift for the Gladiator. Now everyone says 2.5 inches. You don't have to replace the drive shaft, the front one. Anything over 3.5. Or 3.5 itself is recommended, and now because of the axle
you get
disconnect,
much more than that up in 4s and 5s. You have to.
Yeah.
There's no question. But that's conventional wisdom.
That's conventional wisdom.
Now there's a whole nother course of people out there. Go ahead.
So that's my question. I was asking Kevin is like, okay, look, because of the center axle disconnect, the drive shaft doesn't spin on the front. I'm not looking to wheel this right away, and everyone sees the question I'm going to ask because it is a common question. Is I told Kevin, I said, "What do you think? Do you think I can get away with not having to do the drive shaft right away?"
And you know what my answer was? It was rather completely left field. What's your appetite for risk?
Yeah,
and he goes, "I think I'll put a drive shaft in it."
Yeah.
Folks, just because it's not turning doesn't mean it can't be overextended or overflexed. Turning means you rip it 360 degrees around.
Yeah.
But if you overflex it and rip it sitting still, it's still ripped. You've now put a tear in it. And when I say ripped, for those that don't know, the potted style drive shafts that are used on the more modern JLs and Gladiators, there is no U-joint. Basically a grooved ball end of a shaft is sunk into a little well, and that well is filled up with a hard-cured urethane rubber. And the rubber bonds and moves and stretches, and it absorbs the vibrations in theory. It flexes in theory, okay, but does also transmit power in theory again. And it does so moderately well if it is within the design parameters. If you look at the housing on that joint, you will notice that there's a steel upper or outer cap that goes above that rubber bushing, and it's got a very noticeable rolled lip. And that lip is supposed to stop you from going too far. All right. The problem is the leverage of an axle bending down. We'll bend that lip just about as well as it'll tear the rubber out.
Yeah.
But at least it gives the warrantor proof that you overextended. So where did we get to this? Well, the answer is yes. I'm going to use fictitious numbers. I'm not going to go out and tell you inches because somebody will go out and measure theirs and send us an email. Oh, but mine is. I'm not going there.
Let's play pretend.
Let's play, round numbers. Let's say that in the factory position, and let's just talk about axle movement in whole digits. And if the thing is parked at the factory angle, the way it came from the dealership, and we're going to call that 0.
Okay.
All right. And you find out that because of the stock shocks and bump stops up and down, that you can deflect that drive shaft. In other words, drop the axle down, which makes the angle of the drive shaft to the pumpkin steeper, and it goes to 2.5. Okay. And maybe with it going all the way up to the bump stop, it's a minus 1.5.
Okay.
And at that point, the manufacturer says, yeah, we're good. Now, you go ahead and lift the vehicle. Well, you've just moved from 0 to starting out at +2.
Okay.
All right. You're still within that 2.5.
Right.
So if that never goes anywhere, you're fine. It'll run. It's going to wear a little quicker because you're starting off instead of at 0, you're starting at 2. But okay, you're not going to wheel it. You're never going to hit a bump stop. You're never going to hit a pothole. You're never going to cut a corner and clip a ditch a little bit and go to 3, 4, 5.
Just acceleration alone.
Acceleration may lift it up enough. So in other words, what's your tolerance for risk? Yes, there are people out there whose potted U-joint assembly, which are leading a U-joint, I realize that, has survived longer than that. And that's risk does that. It's a bell-shaped curve. You have people that are at the nothing ever happened into the curve, and you have people that drove 15 feet and the thing spit its guts out.
Right.
All right. And most people fall in the middle. And so at this point, I think it's a matter of risk. Yeah. Now, there are points when you go up to a lift. If you get to a lift that makes that angle go up to a 4, well, you're done. You're done for. You're not going to make it outside the street. You're going to go a little ways, and within, a couple of days, you're going to be back at the guy going, why is my drive shaft making noise? Because it ripped up the rubber and spit it out.
I can say 3 times before we go any further, before we get an email about people, is that the dealership I worked at, we were slapping 4-inch lifts on Jeeps.
Yeah, I know.
And literally, I was already the Jeep whisperer in some aspects, but literally, I'm like, we need to change front drive. No, it's fine. Send it. And literally 2,000 miles later, hey, it's making a clicking noise. It's a front drive. It's the front Mazeppa joint. Yep. No, you should. Yes, it is. Go. And I'd stick my finger up there and pull the burnt grease out of it, going, see?
Yeah. So it's one of those things that I'd like to tell folks, there's a risk there's a chance it'll work well, but it's what's your appetite for risk? Because the chances, the higher the lift, the worse it's going to be. And the potted joint, okay, only has a certain torque level. You put bigger tires on there, you're increasing the torque loading on the drive shaft. All right. And now you change the angle. And I have no idea how to throw your driving style into the factor. Yeah. Because your driving style, if you're stomping in low range, people are, well, it'll work fine. Well, you put it in low range, you just doubled or tripled the torque, depending on, even quadrupled if you have
oversized tires.
With oversized tires, you just jump the torque up to the max. And there have been the potted joints that have torn apart just on a launch. They're not a bad joint. That's the key. Yeah. They're not a bad joint. They have limits. U-joints have their limits. If you go on the Spicer's technical website, and please don't email me, or I haven't looked it up in a while, but they tell you, they don't even tell you that there's a failure point on a regular U-joint. What they do is they say, okay, if it's 0 degrees, it's not going to last because it's going to dry out. It needs to have about 1 degree of angularity between the drive shaft and the pinion. That will cause the pinion needles to rotate in the cups, distributing grease regularly. 1 to 3 will give you the, let's say, let's say a million revolutions. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just using it as a quantifier, folks. A million revolutions with basically a 90% chance of survival, or 99%. At that point, they don't tell you that if you go to 4 degrees, it's going to fail. What they tell you is instead of a 99% chance of survival, 0 to 3, you'll go down to 95% chance of survival. So you can go for a long time, but it's going to fail sooner than if it wasn't bent. And if you go to 5 degrees, it's going to lower the life expectancy more. You get down, their chart goes down to, okay, you're at 15 degrees. You got about 25% of the life of a non-loaded U-joint.
Right.
Does that mean it doesn't work? No, it works. It's just not going to last very long.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what they're saying is, look, you're going to blow it out.
I'm suffering that right now with the LJ because I'm just with the caster. You looked at it.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm like 2.5 or something like that. I'm at 3.
Yeah.
And that angle. And it's like, I'm right at that edge.
You're right at the max. And because of the short wheelbase, narrow wheelbase of the TJs, they are very prone to vibration. Not guaranteed, folks. I know that you guys are out there with these lift kits that aren't shaking. And I'd almost bet you got worn out U-joints because that's where the shaking's occurring, but you're just not feeling it.
Well, I also, too, don't have a transfer case drop.
Yeah. And that's what I had to do was I just put a 1-inch drop on my transfer case. Skid plate came down. I just got the little puck wafers that are, actually, it wasn't even a full 1 inch. I think it was a 3/4 inch. And lo and behold, my vibrations disappeared. And you have brand new, high-end, high-quality U-joints in that drive shaft on the LJ. So, yes, you're feeling probably the same vibration I felt with my Metal Cloak lift because I had new front axle, new front drive shaft, new rear drive shaft. So there was no room for anything to shake without it passing along to my rear end, sitting on the seat. So that's another thing that we can try on yours is 6 bolts. And a floor jack, and you need the longer bolts and the spacers. So
where do I find the spacers? Well, we talk about that.
We'll find that.
Yeah.
They're fairly easily available. It's a bushing. It's just you need to remember. I got to go look up what the inside diameter is. I think it's a 1/2 inch hole, and then it's thickness, and you get a whole pack of them, and then you get the longer bolts at the hardware store. Just make sure they're grade 5 or better. I went with 8s, and we put them all back in, and lo and behold, you're going to be like, oh my.
Well, it had the transfer
having said
case.
that, I don't know how your shifter will work.
Well, it had the transfer case drop on it with the Skyjacker lift.
Yeah.
And Skyjacker lift. And I took that off because everyone told me I don't need to run it because, because I had the Rubicon with the slip yoke eliminator in the back and it was an LJ and all that. But the front drive shaft, as you said, is always the same. So I may throw that back on there because, again, I don't like the idea of running a Bluetooth drive shaft. Mm-hmm. But I think if I do pull that drive shaft, and that is my shaking problem, I think I'll go with that next because, as you said before, obviously, you tried adjusting your arms and it still wouldn't change anything.
Well, what it was for me is I could bring the arms back enough to get the angularity out of the U-joint, but then my caster was so small that I had wandering.
Okay.
I want the best of both worlds. And there's a third equation, obviously, when you're adjusting a U-joint angle. We all think about the caster camber angles of front or rear, which is the rotation of the pinion off of level.
Right.
Okay. And you can, in fact, you keep raising the pinion angle, which lowers the caster, which is the center line through the knuckles, through the ball joints to ground. And if that's not... I've seen people write, 5 degrees is fine. Well, in some cases it can be. In some cases it can shake like a wet dog. The factory manual says 7+. In other words, you can have as much as you want, but you really shouldn't go below 7. Now, there's more to it. And for those of you who are front-end specialists, I do realize that there's the included angle, and the taller the tire, the more you get lead on the tire with less caster. And folks, all that is the idea of the turning point. If you make an imaginary dotted line through your wheel center line, through the ball joints, you're going to have a point where it touches the ground. And that's, if you think of a chopper motorcycle, how the forks go way out there, okay, that's your caster angle. Your turning focus isn't so much turning the wheel right or left, it's leaning it right or left. The more you lean it, the less it shakes. Okay, the more you turn it standing straight up, the more unstable it is. It wants to weeble wobble around too. If you have it negative, it's like a shopping cart, and we've all pushed that shopping cart through Big W
with the bum wheel. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's all caster and lead angles. Now, I get it. You went to 33s. 31s were an optional at 7+.
Right.
Going up 1 inch in altitude, because this is only dealing with the radius. Okay, so 29-inch tall, 30-inch tall to a 32 is 2 inches in diameter, which is 1 inch in radius. 1 inch doesn't change the lead, which is from that pivot point back to the center of the weight straight down.
Right.
That's your lead. And that's what caster sets, just to get technical on you. And as you get a bigger tire, you get more lead space, so you technically can bring the caster down. And that's the argument. And I get that, except that the larger the tire, the more mass you're working with out there and the more force you need to keep it pointed straight.
Right.
Whereas the amount of force generated by the rotating tire with that lead, the less likely, the larger the tire, the heavier the tire, the more force you need to keep it centered, the self-centering of returning your wheel to center. I know that I'm right at it because even where I'm set today, which is 7, I let go of my wheel. If I'm in a hard turn, because it's leaned over, so to speak, it comes back up, but it does not come to center. It gets to within a couple of degrees of center, and I have to pull it centered.
Okay.
So that tells me I'm right there. If I lose any more caster, I will start, it will not return to center even closer. It'll be further and further out. Well, that's when you start getting into the point where it can fight, it hunts from side to side. And we all know that hunting from side to side as death wobble.
Yeah.
Or shimmy. Like I say, shimmy is the one that you can control. Death wobble is the one that if you put your hand in there, you break your thumb.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of one of those weird little technical things that a lot of people have opinions based on observations, but observations are single case. Until you've gone out and seen hundreds of thousands of these like the manufacturers and the laboratories do, or you can recreate situations by dynamic. In other words, if I go out there, okay, I'm going to do a front end alignment on a Jeep and I'm going to remove caster until I get death wobble. And don't do it on the road. You do it on a rolling road.
Right.
And then you adjust it forward. You can find that spot where it no longer self-amplifies. Okay, that's what a death wobble is, folks. It's a self-amplifying oscillation of the steering from right to left. That's the technical term. It's an oscillation, and it self-amplifies. And if you go far enough, you can say, okay, that's where death wobble stops. But steering still feels like, marshmallow. I don't have return to center. You don't realize how much we rely on turn to center. When roads are banked, return to center is what keeps you on that bank, and it doesn't have you drift in or drift out. All right. So these are all little features. And if you wanted to go do a test on a Jeep, I'm sure you could sit there if you had access to an unlimited weekend with the alignment machine and a good road course. You could sit there and adjust, go drive, adjust, go drive, adjust, until you wore out, a wrench or two.
Right.
And you'd get to a point going. And the first thing you'd find is that Chrysler knew what they were talking about. 7+, man, I'm up here at 8, and this thing drives like a sports car.
Yeah.
Problem is when you pass about 6 on a lifted Jeep that doesn't have relocated knuckles that change the difference between the pinion and the outer knuckles, your drive shaft rattles.
Yeah.
Because it can't take the angularity. Your caster and your drive shaft, to bring this diatribe back full circle, fight with each other.
Yeah.
That's why when I had my axle made by Dynatrac, guys did it there. The first thing they asked me when we talked about building the axle for me, well, stock included angle is 6 degrees on a TJ, and it's 10 degrees on most XJs of the similar years in the mid 2000s. Did you want to alter that? Yes, please. Yes, please. Give me 12.
Yep.
So that I could have, and this would never go into a low Jeep anymore because it would cause me other problems. Like my drive shaft would be overarched the other way, if you follow me. I need the lift. And yes, I'm still running a transfer drop case, but I think part of that is not my axle end. I think it's my double cardan at the transfer case end, which the caster doesn't have anything to do with.
Right.
That's just simply angularity. And that can actually vary, folks, from manufacturers' double cardan assembly from one to the other, because the clearances between the center spider, the H frame that goes in there, and the yoke ends at the ends, when they start to touch, they don't have to touch hard. You will know it. You will get a blah, 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 at certain speeds because, of course, different speeds, different suspension movements. And I'm pretty sure that if you get it hard enough to leave witness marks, you've already broken something.
Yeah.
Because you're now talking about solid cast to solid cast impacting twice every revolution.
Yeah.
You know, and by dropping the transfer case on my TJ, it changed that. It might work on someone else's. I said every Jeep's different because I have a 42 RLE 4-speed transmission behind the 6 on Brown Dog motor mounts with a with a 3/4 inch transfer case drop, and now all of my joints clear. I don't have an impact. If you have your 241 transfer case, that's got different dimensions.
Right.
So you may need more, you may need less. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it all depends on which end of the drive shaft you think the vibration's coming from. Have I confused you thoroughly?
No, it's
Rats. I was trying. No.
I got you. Remove drive shaft, bring Jeep here, then go from there. Gotcha. Yay.
Well, that is exactly what I did on mine. Was I removed the drive shaft when I was having the problems and drove it around, and I was like, "Oh, this is sweet." All right, and even though and the full honesty here, folks, I never got the front drive shaft perfect because at some of the highway speeds that I won't mention, since they kind of
Statute of limitations.
Statute of limitation. Anyway. I still got some vibration, and my ultimate answer was disconnecting hubs. So I didn't spin the drive shaft at those higher RPMs. Okay. It was not bad. Scott rode with the Jeep back then when I had straight coupled. It was barely noticeable, but I was the driver and I noticed it. Yeah. I'm an engineer, and vibrations annoy me.
Yeah, they annoy me quite a bunch.
So, I ended up going back in history again.
Yeah.
Well, Jeep used to say, do not drive vehicle in 4-wheel drive above 45 miles an hour because of that very reason, angularity of the drive shaft. But how did they deal with it? And every other manufacturer for the 50s, 60s, 70s, even beginning into the early 80s, manual hubs.
Yeah.
Do not engage hubs above 45 miles an hour. They really would have been nice if they put a picture of the you know how you have the little seatbelt images of the vehicle rolling over? You have one of those, but it's shaking like a wet dog.
Yeah.
So these are all factors that come into it. You've got to remember that a 4-wheel drive is a doubly complex machine with a lot of rotating components in positions that they work counter to the mission of the vehicle.
Right.
I've got a rear drive shaft turning and a front drive shaft turning, but I want that front drive shaft to move up and down, and I actually have a little bit of right to left, and then my wheels need to turn, but they also need to turn themselves back.
Right.
It's just yada.
It's a complicated piece of equipment. That's
even
why
the simple ones are still mechanically complicated.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we come along in the 90s and we go, ooh, everything's better with a computer.
Mark would agree with that.
Yeah, he would. But Mark has made it his business.
Yes.
Hats off to him. But yeah, and then, of course, every year it's like, let's make it smarter. And now it's like, hey, Scott, you don't have your earbuds with you. Buzz, 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 buzz. Hey, Scott, you don't have your earbuds with you. Yeah, I know. He argues with his watch. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Technology beats me again, folks. I don't turn it off because, again, the one day I do is I lose the dang things.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's your choice.
Yes.
You notice that my phone usually doesn't reside with me unless I'm going somewhere. And that's not really for anybody to get a hold of me. That's for me to yell for help when I do something stupid.
Well, that's why I have the watch, because the watch is a Series 7, or they get a Series 6 or Series 7. So if I fall down and go boom, it immediately alerts you because you're in my emergency contacts, and Autumn. So, and plus it helps keep my heart rate in check. And
it tells you that yesterday you made your...
I killed my exercise ring. Normally 30 minutes, boom shakalaka. I did 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Take that ring.
Oh, we went out and dug a really big hole.
Yes,
Total
we did.
sidebar, non-Jeep related, other than it keeps me from my Jeep, folks. I have designed and built a home water treatment facility in my backyard. And to replace a rusting, an all but rusted out, clogged contraption of pump tanks and valves and gauges and switches that kind of sort of almost nearly worked.
Folks, he basically took a stock YJ 4-cylinder 2.5 with holes in the floorboard, 3 different types of tires, and the 4th one was bald. And he basically made himself on a LS supercharged on Rockwell axles with 50-inch tall tires series of a pump house that is apocalyptic in nature.
Well, you helped build it.
I know. That's why I'm excited about it, because my drum room's going to get the same treatment, hopefully.
Yeah, we everything from the slab up, foundations up, piping underground, piping above ground. It's got dual filters with a bypass in the incoming water line. It's got a 250-gallon pressure tank because the old one was short cycling. It's got water treatment in terms of iron removal and water softening.
And a small kitchen sink.
A very small kitchen sink.
And we're not even joking, folks. There is actually a sink in the drainage.
It's like any other laboratory, because I do have blow-off valves for the water softener as well as blow-off assemblies for flushing out the filters. And you have to have an air gap by code between them and the waistline. So if something happens while you're blowing off and the world goes negative pressure, it doesn't suck pathogens from your wastewater back up into your drinking water, like you wouldn't notice that. But anyway,
why is my water smiling at me?
Yes, But anyway, so I cobbled up something. It's a 4-inch diameter sink. It reminds me, if you're old enough to remember going to the dentist where you had the little cup and he'd say rinse and spit into the little porcelain sink, except mine's PVC, but it's about that big and it drains down the middle. And all those purge lines, I don't have to catch the water. I just open the valve and it goes, psh, and they do it rather well.
That they do.
And we put in the drainage sump system, a dry sink for where all that wastewater goes, because it's not septic, it's just water. So I know this isn't Jeep related, but this is why my topics, and I've been a little scarce to some of my other Jeep friends, is like, this was really bad.
This was important because
the house was turning orange from rust in the water. Brand new furniture. brand new sinks and appliances. And so it was one of these, I made myself a vow about 6 weeks ago. Priority A. Get it done.
Then we can go play. Yay!
Yeah.
Like get a lift installed in the Geladiator. A Geladiator? Folks, I'm tired and I got to drive 100 miles back home.
So anyhow, I think we have probably beat this whole story thing to a pulp.
Those questions do get asked a lot.
They do.
And so I figured we'd go ahead and preempt and answer them.
No, I think so. And as a reminder again, not only the 4x4 Radio Network on other good shows, but go look on Facebook and say hi to Autumn and say you heard about her here on the podcast.
Exactly.
And check it out. It's early on. She's still learning her steps on both working with a Jeep, working with tools, and learning how to be a YouTube star to be.
I do want to make a quick note, though. In one of the videos where she's driving, it sounds like the bottom end is about ready to come out of the motor. It is not rod knock. It is a pre-detonation sound. And because of the timing was off when we drove it. But we got to drive it, darn it. We got to drive it. So.
Yeah.
And by we, I mean her.
She didn't share that with anybody, and I don't blame her.
No, that was her toy. So, all right, folks. Well, as we always say, it's time to lock the hubs, put the Jeep in 4 low, and hit the trail. And while always, when you hit the trail, make sure to take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave said trail, because we want to keep these trails open for our kids, our kids, our grandkids, and Autumn's GPW.
Sounds good.
Oh my God, I got it right. I didn't have to read it. Although I did close my eyes and channel my inner Kevin. Go build something. Go fix something. Car whisperer. Okay. I'm in trouble.
We'll let
Mildly.
you go for now.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.